So I would like to welcome you to our first panel discussion with our inductees of 2025, and let me introduce you to this elite group, which I'm so honored to sit next to. We have Keith Carter. We have Bega Metzner, which is the daughter of Sheila Metzner, which was unfortunately not able to make it this evening, but her daughter is just as dynamic, so we're going to have a great time with Bega this evening. We have David Burnett, and we have Adger Cowans. And such a delight for me to be here, so I don't really want to start off with, I'm sure throughout the years you've all gotten all these questions that are pretty rudimentary. So what I would like to ask, in your welcome bag, you saw a book, and I don't know if you looked through it or not, but the title is Photographs Not Taken, and it was from one of our sponsors, Daylight Books. So in your career, is there one photograph that still haunts you that got away? That still is nagging you? I see you shaking your head, David. Want to take it first?
Is that on? Okay. As soon as you said that, I had a whole screen full of things come up in my head. But there's one that is like the poster child of a missed image for me. And that was in 1974, I was then working for the French photo agency Gamma, based in New York, but traveling all over the place. And I'd been doing a lot of work in Paris, and I covered the French presidential elections. And when that was over, there were, they had a new president, Giscard d'Estaing, and so the presidential stuff started happening. And there was a visit from Willy Brandt. Anybody remember who Willy Brandt was? He was the mayor of Berlin for a very long time in the 50s, at the time of the Berlin Wall in the 60s, and then became the chancellor. And there was a big spy scandal because one of the people in his cabinet turned out to be a bit of a spy. I can't remember. Gunter something or other was his name. Anyway, I remember being armed with my usual M4 Leica, couple of Nikons on each shoulder, including the 180, which was a really beautiful telephoto lens, 180-2.8. And it was just after sunset, so the light, while in the courtyard of the Élysée Palace, there was a few lights, but there were a lot of TV lights. And when the car pulled in, none of us yet knew that this scandal was about to break about the spy scandal. But I can remember looking through the window of the limousine. I was kind of in front of the car, looking through the front window, and this pall of death on Willy Brandt's face. And I had my 180 on it, and I just shot the crap out of it. And then he gets out of the car and walks in, and I look down, and my lens is on f/22. So I still can see that face. I mean, that is, you know, if you could take a picture of my brain right now, you'd see the picture. It was beautifully lit because you had all the TV lights and the shadows, and it was harsh, and it was scandal lighting, and it'll only be in my head forever. So those pictures definitely get away. You know, the good ones got away.
Anybody else want to follow up on that question?
It was 1961, and I had gotten one of my first jobs, professional jobs, to do a cover for Theater Magazine, the Jazz Festival in Newport. I had 2 Leicas, M2, that was all I had. And you know, the stage, you really needed a telephoto lens. But anyway, I shot some really nice pictures. And Art DeLugo, who ran the jazz club in New York, I went up with him because I didn't have any money. He said, we're going up. So I went up with him. And I didn't have a hotel room, you know, and so I was just around the stage until everything started. So I photographed, the festival was great, Duke Ellington was there, Coltrane, everybody, I really got some nice shots, and it was all great. And toward the end of it, you know, I was running out of film. I'd shot about 20 rolls, and I'd run out of film. And Duke Ellington finished, and I went backstage, and he jumped off the stage, everybody was clapping, and he put on a white coat and jumped in a car with a white woman with blonde hair and a white Cadillac and took off. So I was hanging around backstage. I didn't know how I was going to get back to New York. And so I'm backstage, and Louis Armstrong was sitting there. I'd taken pictures of him on the stage. He said, how you doing, son? I said, I'm all right. And I sat down, and he said, I said, no, thank you. And we sat there talking, and the whole time I was thinking, you're out of film. You don't have any film. You know, you shot. I was looking, I was saying, maybe I'll do a double exposure. I was thinking of everything. No film. In those days, you had 36 shots, and he was talking, just me and him. And he was talking about where he grew up and everything, and he had the white handkerchief, and he rolled it out, and he took out the joint, and he said, I was like, I could have got some great shots. Not one.
How about you?
I don't think I can answer that question. I wish I had the answer to that. It's one of those can I call a friend moment, but I phone a friend, yes.
But Keith, do you have one that escaped you?
Well, to be anticlimactic, no. I've taken every photograph I wanted to take.
So since you couldn't answer that question, Bega, you told me a little bit about your mother's history, and I've done some reading on her. What I didn't realize is that she started photographing at 39 when she had 5 children in and out of the home. She photographed for Vogue magazine, did still lifes. I mean, she was very diverse in her photography. What were you drawn to as a young person, seeing your mom work? What really caught your attention about how she was as a woman photographer, her craft, what imagery she was making, what drew you? Because you yourself are such a creative, and so is your father, so we can get into that a little bit, if you could give us a little family dynamic. But from your mom, where did you get that inspiration? When you looked at her work, did you say, oh, Mom, anybody could do that? Or was it, wow, that's really fantastic? Did you idolize her? Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Wow, that's a very broad question. Yes, a creative father, creative mother, an extraordinary person. I think that I was born a subject of hers, quite literally, and I think I was inspired much later in life by her work and the way she used light and the way she used form and the subjects that she used. But earlier on, I'd have to say that it was kind of irritating being a subject. I was telling a gentleman earlier that I was on my way to take a shower. I don't remember how old I was, and I had a plastic bag on my head to cover my hair, which was a little different than this at one time. But literally just to keep the water off my hair. And my mother said, she always had a camera set up in some way for a still life or a vase or something in the apartment in New York City. But I was passing through, and she, stopped me and said, I want you here, sit here, do this. And I was like, Mom, I'm on my way to the shower. Like, this is, and this photograph of Bega in a plastic hat, is something, it's a part of her repertoire. It became a thing, and but the look on my face and the feeling that I had in that moment was actually kind of pissed. I was pissed off. I was just like, but the subject became, the beauty of that photograph and the memory for me personally, but also it has moved on into many of her books and things like that. And then, yeah, I mean, I could go on and on. I don't want to, but it's just, I think her work is extraordinary, and seeing it over the years and being a part of it, the detail that she used and the time that she took for every single photograph. She was never a quick shooter. I've been on many, many film sets and many, many photography sets over the years where it's strobe and this and constant. You take 100 photos to get one. She would take one photo to get one. She would take the time to set up the flags and the silks and the lights, and it was so completely stylized, and it's extraordinary. And as a model within that, sometimes painful, because your left finger is everything. I mean, or your hand, you don't, the moments, yeah, anyway. So the gesture is incredibly important.
Right, absolutely, thank you.
I have one tiny little Sheila story.
Okay.
She came to Park City to work on the 2002 Salt Lake City Olympic photo project, which was put together by John Hewitt, a really great photographer from Boston, who shoots, and at the time, I'm not sure now that he really does anymore, but he would shoot a lot of 4x5. And he brought in Andy Anderson, who at the time owned more Graflex cameras than any other person in the Northern Hemisphere, had like 25 of these beautiful old 1930s and 40s Graflexes. And so we're surrounded by, and that's kind of when I got dipped into the 4x5 magic oil, was seeing these guys working. And they've got this, we still the days of ready loads where you could get these single sheets and just run them through when you're down at the ski jump, and every ski jumper that comes over, you're making one shot and putting it from one pocket to unexposed and exposed. But I remember we're standing around having one of these conversations about 4x5 this and 4x5 that. And Sheila said, well, I shoot 35, but I shoot it like it was 4x5. And I remember that from 23 years ago. So I must have really been touched by that moment. And it said a lot. And it just kind of reflects exactly what you were just saying. But when you hear it in a real extemporaneous moment, you know that it has meaning.
So Keith, the gentleman that never let one get away.
Oh, I let some get away, but I made the photographs I wanted to try to make.
So can you elaborate a little bit more on your photography? You seem I'm a huge fan and collector of your books and love your work. I would say I feel like there's an emotional component. I feel like you almost photograph with your heart.
Well, thank you.
Whereas I guess if I had to compare David's work being out in a war zone or covering the Olympics and stuff, it's kind of like, and I think your style of work is more intentional, but I want to hear it from you through your life, how you first came to be and how you've gotten to this point, and how have you evolved, or have you evolved, and where are you going to next?
Well, that's a lot of questions there. My mother was a single parent before it became quite so fashionable, and at the age of 5, she would turn our apartment kitchen into a darkroom at night. So I kind of grew up around it, and I would push prints around in the orange light and things like that. So that's how it began. And then later on, when I went to the university world, I got a camera. Make a long story short, I made a few relatively pitiful photographs, but I was kind of serious. and I loved Paul Caponigro's work at that point. I mean, it was the first work that I'd seen that seemed both sensibility as documentary and poetic, and that really affected me. So I tried to work with those corners. And then the last part of this is I fell totally in love with African American folk art, or what they called at one time naive art, which I thought was a pitiful term, but it had a spirit to it. I mean, it was really, I could feel it. That's the best way I can tell you. And I thought, that's what I really want my pictures to do. I know they can't make everybody feel it, but that's what I want to do. So I tell myself I'm trying to write a poem with, light, that kind of thing. So.
Well, I do think that you've accomplished that in your work. I certainly can feel it.
What was the line that you wanted to steal from me earlier at the hotel?
What field?
You something about, no, just when you were asking me before about the family. So my father had 8 kids. My mom had 5 of those. And you were going to start the novel my memoir I was going to write. You had said there was a line that I had said about that. You don't recall?
Sadly, no.
No, okay. It was a really good start to the memoir. I just...
I'll have to give that to
Okay, we'll talk about it later.
So, Adger, now that he mentioned Paul Caponegro, I want to hear about you arriving to New York at the Y. You had corresponded with Gordon Parks, and you gave him a ring and said, "I'm staying." He said, "Where are you staying, kid?" And you said, "The Y." And he said, "Get out of there and come over here."
Right.
So can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, I had written him when I was in school. You know, when I told my father I wanted to go and study photography, he said, "You're crazy. Photography is a hobby. You know, it's not a hobby. Kodak makes a camera, they send it to you, you shoot it, send it back." So I don't know what you're talking about. But my mother was an amateur photographer, so I went to Ohio University to study photography in 1954. And I wasn't really interested in photography. You know, I do what most students do the first year, party. I was away from home the first time. Second year, party. Oh, third year. And then I took some pictures, and somebody started talking about how they felt about them. And I thought, that's interesting. It gave me a way into people's minds. And that's what really excited me, because I knew what I had shot, but I didn't know if anybody else knew it. But when they talked, I could see that, you know, I was on to something, and that's what really got me excited. Anyway, my teacher told me, when I asked him, is there somebody black doing what I'm doing? My uncle said, find somebody black. Well, he didn't say black in those days, he said Negro. And so I asked my teacher, Walter Allen, because I thought he was hip. He smoked with a cigarette until the ash burned. He was from New York. So he said, I think there's a man at Life magazine, Gordon Parks, and I wrote him. He said, you know, next time you're in New York, you know, look me up. And he gave me his number. Well, we used to come back and forth in New York all the time from Ohio when Miles Davis was at Carnegie Hall, or if Monk was at the Five Spot, because our teacher, David Hostetler, was a jazzophile and a drummer. So he would say on Friday, hey, Miles Davis, we drive to New York. So one of those times, you know, I went and I saw Gordon, and he said to come up and meet him. And so I'm waiting, White Plains, and I see this powder blue Corvair with white interior and a black man with hair waving and shades on and smoking a pipe. I said, I'm going to be a photographer. That's really hip. And he had a turnaround driveway and a split level house. And then I went back to school. So when I came back to New York, And I was at the Y. He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm at the Y." He said, "Get out of there, come up here." And so he said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I don't know." He said, "Well, you can live here with me and my family and work with me at Life magazine." And that was it.
Yeah, so on that note, that he kind of took you in, and you mentioned Paul Caponegro, and I've had lovely conversations with Paul before he passed. And
Everybody, that's the one that got me.
right, but he was always telling me stories of how he would have an individual open a door for him. That person would take him under his wing, and then he'd say, "Okay, you're off to the next guy." And it sounds like Gordon Parks did that for you, even though you've met a lot of obstacles in your life also. I remember an interview that you were doing about they hired you, and then when they saw that you were black, they were like, "Oh no, we've done the shooter." So was that the only challenge? Your biggest challenge was yourself as a photographer, not having the right subject? What was your greatest challenge in your photography? For all of you, what is your greatest challenge? And Bega, you can certainly answer this as in your career.
Connecting my feelings with my images has always been my challenge. And I tell my students that you take pictures with your heart. It's your eyes that see, but it's the heart that feels. And when you can hook those two up together, you got it. And if people see it and recognize it, then you know you have it. But that's my feeling about taking pictures. And all of your work that you do leads up to that. All the experiences that you have in your life. You know, everybody has good experiences, bad experiences, life, death. We all live, we all hurt, we all love, we all die. It's how you deal with the good things and the bad things that makes your character. And when you have experienced enough life, I don't think, at 21 you should have a retrospective. Even at 31, not a retrospective. Maybe at 50 you could have a retrospective. But I think you have to experience enough life, and you have to learn how to live and die and come back again. Emotionally, physically, all these different ways. And it's how you deal with that. And it's always a challenge with me when I'm photographing. Can I feel enough to capture the spirit of that person or that thing or whatever it is? And that's always a challenge, forever. It never goes away.
Really beautiful. I like that. David, totally different genre of what Adger and Keith, but I'm sure there's photographing in a war zone and the Olympics photographing a war zone and the Olympics and things like that. So what was your biggest obstacle?
Well, most of my work has been events, whether it's a staged event like the Olympics or the Iranian Revolution, the Vietnam War, where there's nobody handing you a piece of paper in the morning telling you what you're going to do today. It's getting out into what's going on, and you don't, sometimes there's going to be a big pro-Khomeini demonstration this afternoon, 1 million people will show up. Well, that's something that you want to physically just get yourself into that milieu, but then you're absolutely right. It's like everything you do is a response from your eye and your heart. And even if it's like a hardcore news moment, you're trying to capture something that people who aren't there are going to have some maybe token appreciation of. And that is kind of what keeps you looking when it's like, oh God, I can't take a picture here, there's nothing to shoot. Like, how many times have you said there's nothing to shoot, and then 90 seconds later something amazing happens? I mean, I find every great picture has been preceded by some version of there's nothing to shoot here. At least in my world, where you were kind of always, you just didn't want to ever run out of enough energy to throw yourself into it. And it was real easy at some times. You could make a pretty good excuse. It's like, man, I walk with these people for 9 hours. I think I need to give it a rest. But, well, let's give it another hour. And I mean, the 10th anniversary of 9/11, I went up to the top of Manhattan and walked the entire length of Manhattan with the New York Fire Department bagpipers. And from about the beginning, like from 9 o'clock until 5 o'clock, there just were no pictures. It was dark. There were people coming and going. It just wasn't there. But I stayed all the way down to Wall Street, and that's where the picture was. So you have to convince yourself that to have enough confidence to stay in the game long enough to let what might happen, happen. And there's no way you'll ever know until it either does or doesn't.
All right, let's see. So, my mom grew up in Brooklyn. She came from nothing. This is the interesting part. And I think that it's something that I feel in my work too, is that yes, she is a woman, and yes, she is a female photographer, but she is just a photographer. And she's always been that. It's not about the fact that she's a woman. And I know that that's a big thing right now with everything that's going on in the world and the idea of including and inclusivity and diversity and all these things. But really, she truly believed that her work, she's a photographer, and yes, but she doesn't want to be part, it happens to be female, and she doesn't necessarily want to be asked to be in an exhibition because it's female photographers. She wants to be in an exhibition because she's a photographer. And I think that's always inspired me, too, in the work that I do. I am a woman, and I, of course, that's an extraordinary thing, but let me do my work because of who I am and whatever my work means, not because of my gender.
Right. Well, I think that's a whole other conversation that we can go into for another day, and it's
a glass of wine.
Yeah, our bottle. But it's definitely something that as women we always struggle to not identify with the gender or because of the gender and because of the quality of work. But Keith, I would like to ask you the same question as the gentleman. Has there been any obstacles in your career path? If you've always gone with the flow, tell us a little bit about your journey.
Well, the first part, I don't recall any major obstacles outside of what is a difficulty for people everywhere, and sometimes you just didn't have the resources to go and finish a project. But the thing that always got me about photography is there are all kinds of genres. There's 5 of them, right here. Or is that how many? Yeah, 4 of us, 5 of us. But I loved Joseph Campbell, the wonderful mythologist and a wonderful writer, and he said something that electrified me once. It was a PBS thing. He said, accidents in your life can often become main plots. And that just rocketed me out of my seat. And I thought, I know that innately. You're right. I mean, accidents can become a huge part of your life. The other thing that I love that sort of focuses my work, whether I do some documentary or I'm working on more conceptual things, is the word photography comes from the Greek, and it means loosely writing or drawing with light. That's a lovely thing. And that cuts across all genres of photography. So if you're interested in photography, what do you find interesting in the world? How do you want to spend your time? How do you want to spend your money? What will you keep doing? All of those fundamental questions. I mean, you have a number of great photographers up here, and everybody does it for a different reason. But I bet you money everybody loves the medium and loves what it does for them and their soul, and we don't use that word in the art world much, but to me, it's important. So,
Anybody want to follow up?
I don't know how any of us couldn't take pictures. It's
David, when did you know?
sorry.
When did you know photography's it for me? Don't drop that song.
Don't drop that camera. It happens. Believe me, it happens. I think I knew by the time I had, like mid-college, I started out as a math major to do engineering, and then after a year of a mumbling calculus professor, I switched over to poli-sci my junior year, that summer between sophomore and junior year of college. But by then, I knew that's what I wanted to do, and the following year, I was lucky enough to get a kind of internship at Time Magazine, and it hasn't stopped since that. You know, we're talking about a letter when, I can't remember who said it, but I can remember the day I came home from school, having made a trip to New York and seen a bunch of people trying to get the internship at Look magazine. Oh, that's only for Photo J majors. Well, I wasn't one of those. But I can remember walking into my bedroom and seeing the letter sitting on the bedspread from Time magazine that said, we'd like to hire you to come this summer, and 3 days a week, $85 a week. It's like, that was golden, you know. Never got better than that, really.
I think that being any kind of artist, and when I was, you know, photographer and was being a photographer, I enjoyed being called a photographer, not an artist photographer, but a photographer. Photography is an art. But I think with all artists, being an artist is a calling. All these people have talked about how I made them feel. That's a calling. That's a calling of the spirit deep within. And that's what makes you do it. Just like, you know, if you're going to be a preacher or anything that calls you from within, and you follow it. There are a lot of people that hear the voice, but they don't follow it. So I can't do it. You can't make any money. You know, I got to eat. I got to pay. But if you are truly called, it doesn't matter what else is going on in the world. I ate sardines. I bought film before I paid my rent. I didn't care about the clothes I had as long as I had film. That was the thing. I get up in the morning, I got film. Oh, let me go out in the street and see what's happening. I had film. That was the thing. All the rest of those things didn't matter because I think it's here. You have to do it. You know, it's inside and it comes out.
So let me follow up on that because I know you're also a painter.
Mm-hmm.
So you're a photographer and a painter. So, and I can resonate so much with the spirit calling because when I was young, I would have to wake up and I'd get my charcoals and I would just have to do something with my charcoals. Later on, as you get older and your brain gets filled up with stuff, I lost that gift of the ability to draw on a whim. So I went to photography as my craft because I didn't need a spirit to come down and say, today you're drawing, right? So how do you go from painting one day to photography, because you're still painting, right?
Oh, yes, I have a big show in New York right now.
So tell us about this, and how do you juggle both worlds, or do you have to juggle both worlds?
I don't juggle. I don't juggle. It comes from inside. You know, I call myself an imagist because I make images with photography, with printmaking, with anything, you know, that's in front of me. I'm totally creative. If I'm cooking, with anything that I come across, it's creative. I have to put my spin on it, so to speak. And I think that for me, painting is about, you got a blank canvas. What are you going to do? You know, what are you going to do? With the camera, it's like you put the image in, you click, get everything together, click, 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 click. But with painting, You have to put something there. Now, what is that connection? It's a different discipline. And I don't think, somebody asked me the other day, did you ever consider painting on your photographs? I said, hell no. That's stupid. Why would I take good photographic paper and paint on it? You know, if I want to, I'll paint on paper, I'll paint on any other thing, but why photographic paper? No. You know, but I think it is still the same impetus in terms of there's something in you, spirit, and spirit calls, and you do whatever it is. But I like the idea of using my hands, and that's what got me back to painting. I painted as a child, but I got back to it, I guess, maybe in my 40s or so. I got back to painting, and I paint every day. Take pictures every day. I do, depending on how, if I get up and I watch the sunrise, I feel I go back to the studio, I'll do something, you know. I might wake up the next morning and go out, you know, and now I'm shooting with my 8x10, you know, because I'm a Leica man and 35 millimeter. But I got my 8x10 fixed, and so now I'm going out in the morning just to see what's there. And there's always something. There's never... He talked about, I was waiting for that thing to happen. Yeah, you do. You say, I'm finished. I shot 50 pictures of these people. I'm finished. And then you put your camera in. It's oh, wait a minute. Wait. There it is. There's a picture you wanted and was waiting for all day to happen, you know. But I think it's, you have to wait sometimes. You have to give a thing its space. And when you do, great things happen, you know. Don't be in a rush. Don't be in a hurry.
So,
I'd like to say one thing.
yep.
That I don't know about the rest of you, but I hate getting up early in the morning. If I can get to sleep, I really like to sleep till 7 or 8. But every time, and I can't think of a single time that it didn't happen, that if I had to get up at 4 or 4:30 and be out somewhere at 5 o'clock. I had a commercial job last summer, and I had to be down in the West Village by 7, and I was down there at 5:30 just because. And I don't think I've ever actually gotten up and gotten out that it wasn't something fantastic came along. But you have to throw yourself open to those kind of moments. You know, you can't schedule it. You just have to set it up in a place where the magic can happen. And I'll say one other little thing I just wanted to mention is that I was very lucky being in the sort of Time and Life magazine world a little bit, that I got to know Alfred Eisenstadt and Carl Maidans and some of the old regulars of the magazine world. And they were never, like when you talk about Gordon, there was never anything other than wanting to help and to share and to work with you and to make suggestions. And as little as I can, or I mean as much as I can, and maybe it isn't all that much, I have always tried to give back to young people that you meet on a job somewhere, and somebody, oh, you've been published in Time magazine, and maybe something that you weren't all that impressed with, somebody else saw it, they saw your name. And so I have always tried to kind of pay that forward, because the warmth and the gentility of the people that came before was really something that marked everybody in my generation in the photojournalism world.
I just want to say one quick thing. You know, it's interesting. You have to travel as an artist. You can't stay in one place. You can. I've seen great artists stay in one place. But if you travel, you know, you're in your house, you're making breakfast or whatever, and you're looking, the light comes and it's coffee on the table, and you say, oh, that's all right. Then you go to Paris, and you're sitting in Paris cafe. Oh, look at that shot. It's coffee on the table with the light. Oh, you go to London, you say, oh, look at that. Same thing you've been looking at, but in a different place. You have a different feeling. And a lot of times it happens like that.
I was just going to say in relation to that, well, two things. My mom would travel for photo shoots that were fashion related. She was the first female under contract with Vogue, actually, I believe, as well. And so a lot of her work took her to far off lands, but she found a way to, when traveling, to do her own work in those places as well. Most of her landscape photography primarily came from just being in those places and taking on those landscapes wherever they were, Costa Rica, Venezuela, Moab, Utah, which is how I got there, was with her. Then that also circles back to your comment about waking up early in the morning. If we didn't wake up at the crack of dawn and shot at Fisher Towers outside of Moab, Utah, and looked at the Colorado River, and my brother was her first assistant, and I was her model on this calendar shoot for Mitsubishi with just a woman in an environment that a car might drive in, and my brother and I said, "Mom, we want to live there." And she ended up sending her photography books to this guy who owned the land, and she ended up buying some property and never built on it. And I mean, the story, there's, you know, it's part of the memoir that I haven't yet written, but it's the idea of waking up for magic hour and golden hour and all of those things that you call it, whether it's photography or film, and having the ability to, you know, to be in that moment. And I'm also going to relate this back to something you said, which is the blank slate idea of a canvas. And I think it relates to my work, but I'm just speaking through, I'm channeling my mom. You know, her photographs were frames that were empty, that she chose the sculpture, whether it be an actual physical object or a human person, to be in that, to fill that frame, and that palette became the light and the shadow and the woman or the man or the vase or the flower or, you know, the whatever those things are, and filling those that frame that was an empty thing. But she also is a painter herself, and you know, I love everything that you guys are saying. I'm a huge fan of all of your work, by the way. I just thought I'd say.
Keith, you want to elaborate on that?
Oh, there's so many things. Let's talk about you. I mean, you have an interest in art in a broad sense, or you probably wouldn't be here. You have an interest in photography, some of you, and you have a variety of interests. And so if you're working on assignment, it's you try to please your person that gave you the assignment and that kind of thing. If you're working on personal projects and nobody's paying you for it, that's a different animal altogether, and that takes a different sensibility. Not a better one, but it's a different one. You have to really want to do the project, and it's going to take your time, and it's going to take some money. And I think of it as like writing your autobiography with light. That's kind of a overwrought description, but you know, photography means writing with light. I think having something to work toward, no matter whether it's an assignment or some sort of thing you want to finish in a year and you want to make 48 coherent, intelligent photographs, that's a great thing to have in a life. That's a great goal to pursue. And it doesn't have to just revolve around the world of photography, but to me that's kind of means writing with light. It's ecclesiastical in a way. You're writing with light. You're making pictures with light. Of what and why?
So on that note of your 48 number in your lifetime, is there one photograph throughout your lifetime that you still pulls at your heart the most, that you will say, this one's going to the grave with me, this is my best shot, or not even your best shot, but the one that touched you the most? And can you share, is it one that we would know, or is it one that we haven't seen? Can you tell us a little bit about which image is it that has really gotten you?
Ladies first.
I can't.
Which image of your mother's has really resonated with you as an adult?
I think I have to wait to order last on this one. I can't. That's so hard. I mean, there's just so many things. I guess in my home in Moab, strangely enough, most of the photographs on my wall are of my mother's work. I don't have a gallery's worth. I wish I did. It's one of those requests that I started later in my life to start asking for my birthday, can I just have one of your prints? And I'd only started a couple of years ago. But one of my favorites is the one that actually she gave to my son, Silver, as a birthday present to him, which is the Chrysler Building. Oh yeah, you have that one. Yeah, I mean, I just her photographs of New York. I mean, I'm born and raised there, and I, strangely enough, live in Moab, Utah, out in the middle of the desert. You couldn't get more different than, you know, the red rock landscape and the concrete jungle. I guess there's a total similarity, actually. But her photographs of New York, I think, and then the other, I don't know, her leopard in Africa. I was in Africa with her for this Canon shoot as her PA. I'm putting up bunny ears because she was able to bring me to pretend I was schlepping her equipment so that I could go on safari in Africa with her. And then her flower prints. I mean, they're just so, honestly, I can't think of one specifically. Sorry. My apologies. There's too many.
I guess I can jump in on that one. Going back to photographing for the high school yearbook, football and basketball games, and getting to think I was kind of a hotshot sports photographer. When I go back now and I look at these pictures, it's like, kid, come back and see me next year. I really thought I was something. I was getting, occasionally I had a friend who lived next door to a staff photographer at the Salt Lake Tribune, and he encouraged us to go take your yashika mat with your Highland strobe and go find a basketball game that the paper wasn't going to cover, shoot the first half, race downtown 10 miles down to the Tribune office. They would be happy to develop a roll of film. They'll choose one or two, make a couple of 8x10 prints, and maybe one time out of 2 or 3, they would run a picture, and you'd get a fresh roll of film to cover your film, $5, and a credit line, photo by Dave Burnett, in the next morning's paper, which basically was worth at least $10. And it was like a fantastic thing to start to appreciate the fact that you could get things published and seen by people. And later, as I started to realize I really wasn't that good of a sports photographer, my first Olympic Games was 1984. And Los Angeles, it's coming back to LA in 2028, 44 years later. But I was part of my little agency, Contact Press Images. We had like 4 people, part of a 12-person Time magazine team, including Neil Leifer and a bunch of very famous sports photographers. And at the last Friday of the game, so like about day 12 or 13 of the games, was probably the most talked about race. It was Mary Decker, the great American long-distance runner, and the barefoot farm girl from South Africa who had to run for the UK because there was still the apartheid bloc on running for South Africa. And long two-martini story, but I ended up on about the 5th lap when Zola Budd goes to pass Mary Decker and they collide, and Mary loses her balance and falls into the infield. And the rest of the story is that night I'd been married to Iris, and now in row 4, for about 6 months. And I called her that night before cell phones, so you couldn't just pick the phone up. You had to find a real phone. And I said, well, there was good news and bad news at the Olympics today. And she was like, oh, my God, well, what happened? I said, well, which do you want to hear first? She said, well, what's the bad news? I said, well, the great American runner, Mary Decker, got into a kerfluffle on the 5th lap with Zola Budd and fell and was out of the race and was denied her gold medal. And she said, well, what's the good news? She did it right in front of me. So I made that picture just like you like to think everybody would have made with their 300-2.8, and I can remember taking that extra, it felt like 10 seconds, but it was more like a quarter of a second, just to make sure it was sharp before I fired. And it's a picture that then got published basically everywhere in the world and kind of became this picture that many people knew way before they knew me. And 35 years later, in 2019, I was in Oregon, and I managed to get an email to Mary, and I said, I would love to come by and photograph you. And I had never had a word with her during the games. We'd never spoken, but it was just email. I get to the house, and she's got a couple of dogs, and I said, could you pick up the Dachshund? And she kind of picks the dog up, and she couldn't run anymore because she had arthritis. But I took a picture of her holding her dog, and kind of finally a picture of her as a contented, happy person, which we'd both waited 35 years for. And of course, when I got there, the first thing she said was one rule. I said, what's that? She said, we're not going to talk about 1984. I said, no problem. Let's talk about today. So that picture kind of took on a life of its own, as pictures sometimes do, and I'm sure many people know the picture and don't have any idea who shot it, and that's okay by me.
Thank you so much. Adger?
Well, I don't really have any favorite pictures. They're all favorite. But if I had to pick one, I would say, well, two. One called the egg nude, which is a nude woman that looks like an egg. I love that photograph. And the other one is called Icarus. It's a little tiny figure falling from the sun. And I love that picture, and it's sold a lot all over. And I think that it's because I had just gotten a 21 millimeter lens. This is 1973, 72. And they just come out with 21 millimeter lens. I'm laying on the beach, and they're throwing this little girl in a blanket. I didn't know. I laid down and just saw this figure fall across the sun. And I jumped up, and I got right to the edge of the blanket, and I shot, 8 or 10 shots of the different moves of her against the sun. And it's called Icarus, and I like that picture a lot. It's just the sun and the little figure.
Thank you.
And it's a negative, it's not digital.
There you go. I would like to take a few moments and open it up for questions. If anybody in the audience would, now's the moment. You don't get 4 legends up here. So this is your opportunity to ask questions. Feel free to walk up, use the mic. Don't be shy.
I don't need the mic.
Okay.
I'd like to ask the photographers about our current age of digital, and as you're talking about running out of film, now we have this digital age. What do you see as the advantages or disadvantages of now having digital photography as opposed to having film and developing film, like you used to when you started?
A picture is a picture. How you arrive at it, really doesn't matter. If you have an eye, and that's the dividing line, do you have an eye? Whether you're doing digital or you're doing film, but it's mislabeled as far as I'm concerned. Digital so-called photography are digigraphs. They're not photographs because you're using electronic imagery and you can alter the image. You can do so many different things that you can't do when you're shooting negative. So digital photography is digigraphs. You're a digitographer. You're not a photographer. That's my feeling.
I'll say one thing. I loved your description of how you felt about the rolls of film that were already shot, but that you wanted more film. And there is this thing that doesn't, I love this camera. I don't particularly want to hug the memory cards, but disappeared or dissolved in the world of amazing digital cameras. But there was something wonderful about the film that you could hold in your hand and then run out of and wish you had more.
Sheila, my mom, would put the kids to bed, and then she would get dressed and put on high-heeled shoes and lips and go to her dark room to do her photographs all night long, in the middle of the night. That's like what she did, was in the dark room, and some of her original photographs of the kids and the vases and all the things that I've mentioned are just from her in the apartment on the Upper West Side, and the darkroom that she used to do her original prints. And God, I loved that smell. I still do. And I took a photography class in college just so that I could get to be around that smell and be with 35 millimeter. And I still, it's very rare that you get to smell it, but when you do, it's still, even not as a photographer, but the daughter of one and having taken pictures myself, it's amazing. But I remember digital coming out was really interesting for Sheila because so much of her work was 35 millimeter or Polapan or 8x10 or all of the formats and things that I'm not privy to. But I did mention a couple. I think you guys know what I'm talking about. But Polapan's pretty good. And I remember going to her studio and seeing her assistants like rolling out the Polapan and putting them into the slide sheets. And I mean, and one scratch on that and it's gone. It's like butterfly wings. And that's what, to me, my memory of taking photography classes too is butterfly wings. Like if you expose that one roll of 35 millimeter wrong, it's gone, or you get one scratch and it's gone, or you get a dark room, all that stuff. Anyway, the digital part of it, I think when, as a photographer, doing a lot of work with Ralph Lauren for many, many years, at a certain point, the digital came out. What do you just call it? Digitography became very popular, and so my mom had to make that decision about whether she was going to continue doing that role of, taking photographs. But I think that it's interesting that there are different lenses you can use and different types of formats that can be put onto those photographs to make it look like Polapan or to make it look like something else. But it did change the flavor of her photographs, but she did do everything she could to attempt to continue to have the grain of her work. And the lighting, I think, became even more important in a weird way because it was being able to make it still look like her film, her work. So I think I answered that question, kind of.
I'm not sure what the question actually was anymore.
She asked about the transition from film to digital photography and how that's changed, or has it changed? Do you still shoot film or digital?
I shoot both.
You shoot both still? Both still?
Yeah.
You shoot both still?
No, not anymore.
Just digital now?
In the last 6 months, yes.
Can I say one thing? I was going through, at my agency, we have all the key pictures that were ever published are in a couple of file cabinets called, appropriately, the safe, even though there's no real combination to get there, but it's all the Kodachrome slides and black and white prints, not so much the prints, but the slides. And it comes back to the physicality of film. Like my picture of Ayatollah Khomeini, let's say, when you're looking at that slide, that piece of film was in the room this close to Khomeini. When it was the World Series, that piece of film was at Yankee Stadium. And there's something that film, and in particular slide film, not so much black and white, although black and white was there, but you don't look at the negatives maybe quite the same way. But when I look at those color slides, they were in the room with Reagan and Gorbachev. That's where that piece of film was. And there's something that I find very profound about that, which is completely lacking with, you know, digital photography, as wonderful as it is, and it's pretty amazing what you can do. But there's something about knowing that that little piece of film was actually there at the moment that picture was taken.
Not your memory disk.
So, we created a new word tonight, digitographer, and we learned about painting with light being the Greek definition of photography. So what do you think about today's photographs that are photoshopped so much they don't really look like the original photograph?
I'm not a fan.
I'll second that.
You want to hit that one?
Boo.
No, but it's like we're saying, every artiste, every photographer has their own way of making something. If they're trying to make, you know, if it's so altered from the reality, well, then it can't really be a news picture. And there are lines here. There is, like, you know, this is the word when I first heard it, sophomore year of college, and some Tony New York guy was telling me about how his brother does reportage. And, you know, reportage, you really want there to be a sense of that's really what happened and that's how it looked. If you're an artiste, it's, you know, have at it.
I think it relates more to the work that I do now. I'm a film commissioner, a pitch deck. I want something that relates to, send me a rock. I'll find you that rock. It might not be the same rock, but for me, I am a visual person because of, you know, the people who birthed me, maybe, and growing up around that. But it's interesting, just that question, because somebody sent me a picture of the rock that they wanted with the campground in front of it to shoot this commercial. And I looked at it and I looked at it and I said, you know, this doesn't exist. This is a composite. This is a completely, not just digital, but AI-generated composite of a rock that I know where it is in Monument Valley, and I'll find you that rock. And there's a campground, and I know where that is too, but never the twain of those shall meet. And so, yeah, I can give you both of those, but I can't give you them together. So it's one of those things that, yeah, I don't like it either. I'm totally against it.
So that makes 5 of us. That's great. Going back to you running out of film with Louis, that still pains me.
Mm-hmm. It's painful.
And I remember the transition from film to digital. And I became a snapshot fiend. And I didn't have the craft that I had with them,
Right.
because then we had 36 or whatever
That's right.
the rule was.
That's right.
So I had to relearn how to calm down, focus, and shoot again. And I think that's what you're describing with your love, both of you, and with your film, that it's that tangible, right? That the digital doesn't give you. Am I feeling that right?
Yeah, I had assistants and working with, and they didn't know what a light meter was. I had assistants working with, they didn't know what a light meter was. And I said, you don't know what a light meter is? He said, no, what's a light meter? I said, a light meter is something you use to measure the amount of light. He said, I put everything on automatic, digital. I used to put everything on automatic. It's automatic focus, automatic exposure. I said, well, how do you feel about it? So I just shoot, and pick out the best one. You don't have your feeling in that, you see. Whereas with the 36 shots, you're hunting, you're waiting. You know you only got 36 shots. A lot of stuff has happened. You can't shoot everything, so you have to choose because you only got 36 shots. And when you get down to the last 4, and you know that, that last shot. I got it. Next shot, the first one. Because it's about you being connected with it. Digital, you're not connected to digital in the same kind of way. This is different. And I have students that are digital photographers and they learn darkroom technique and their work changes because there's a real process involved in seeing first and understanding the process of light and the process of electronic energy. Electronic energy will give you pixels. When you blow it up real big, when you blow film up real big, you get grain, totally different. But you can get, a picture on digital and you can put grain in. And not the same thing.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I just got a comment, and I think I've said this to Adger before, just listening to all of you guys. There's a lot of this sense of the craft of photography, this sense of immersing yourself in the processes to end with something you hope you like, right? That you see with your eyes, but was an immediate response from your heart, right? And with Adger, I've discussed this idea that Otto Steinhardt felt like, and some of you up there may know who Otto Steinhardt was. He did the photography subject, which was a photography show which toured, I want to say in the 80s, because that's when I was in college, but it was a series of photographs from Germany post-World War II. So they were really, really incredible photographs. But Otto Steinhardt said that as a direct result of Polaroid cameras, we have a debasement of photography because everyone feels like they can take a picture when they have no concept of how to comprise a composition. What do you guys say to that?
I mean, I think the pictures live and die on their own quality, and I loved shooting 4x5 positive negative type 55 Polaroid. It was a beautiful film. It gave you a print. The print really wasn't so great, but the film was beautiful. And it's not the same kind of Polaroid that, the SX70, which actually there was something which the SX70 camera, which was the one that when you'd take the picture, it would go meep, and the picture would pop out in front. any number of times I carried one of those cameras with me as a way of, you know, the National Geographic on their little expense form had transportation, local hires, gifts to natives. Now, I never really worked on the gifts to natives thing, but there was something about being able, in an environment where people are a little bit suspect of unknown photographers or unknown cameramen walking around taking pictures, and a lot of places for good reason. But I found that being able to give somebody a picture immediately was a way to share a little bit of that energy that you were carrying as a photographer, and that you weren't simply taking all the time. And so I would disagree a little bit with that description of...
We're talking about the availability and how ubiquitous Polaroids had made photography.
Well, there's no question that the craft of photography has taken a real header. Because, yeah, you can, if you're good at Photoshop and you know your way around a keyboard and a screen, and you can take your memory card, and yet it has at the same time democratized photography, which for some of us kind of pissed us off a little bit, because you wish that it had been the price of entry was maybe a little higher. So, yeah, I mean, it's goods and bads all the way through.
I'd just like to comment that I think the most important one was the image is what matters. Now, the feeling of the maker of the image understands that the film was there, but most viewers have no concept of that. What really matters to most viewers is the image. And how it's made is almost irrelevant to the viewer.
Yeah. Having been there to be the subject of my mother's work many, many times, I recall this, the exposure aspect of it, making sure you get the shot, and it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't a strobe, constant, hold your hand on the trigger situation ever. It was I just remember her saying the sound, it's like, 1, 2, 3. She would go, you know, 1 down, 1 up, whatever that is in the world of photography that, again, I can't, Racketing, right. But it was only 3 all the time, but it was always making sure that she got that 3. I just remember, she just always do that, and very specific and very on point. But I personally, I think, you know, in this day and age, everybody can say people say they're photographers all the time, right? Everybody's a photographer. It's not all that good, but there's things online that you can make things look like Polaroids too, you know, old school. But I loved Polaroid cameras, the ones that went like as a stylist for many, many years, that's what we used, that's what we had in order to show somebody what they were going to be wearing, or to show the director what they, you know, it was a very big part of my world, and I still think they're the coolest, and I wish that the Spectra, I could still get Spectra film, because I still have the cameras.
I have nothing to add.
Elizabeth? Yes. So I have a comment and then a question. The comment is, I very much thank you guys for your service. You guys have photographic lives well lived, and it's great that you're still up and at 'em. But the question is, now that you're being inducted into the Photographic Hall of Fame, are you done yet?
No.
No.
Good.
I didn't even know this existed. It was a surprise to me. And somebody said, well, somebody has to put your name in. Well, I know it wasn't nobody in my family, because they don't know about it. So, no, it wasn't any girlfriend, you know, I just, I don't know who mentioned for me to be in this, but I'm really happy to be part of this because some of the greatest photographers I really like. My guy is Edward Weston. That's the man for me because his photographs look three-dimensional. The tonalities and the actual prints that he made. And his fingernails were black because he didn't use rubber gloves. He had to feel those prints, you know, and I think that, I don't know, Kodak started all this shit.
My microphone's out, so I'm going to just put it down. But you mentioned your favorite. I'll just. Adger, you mentioned your favorite. David, did you have a favorite photographer that resonated with, that you admired during your career? And Adger, I'd like to ask you if there's a current contemporary photographer that you admire, and the same for you, past and present.
I was maybe sophomore in college, the year, this would have been mid-60s, when David Douglas Duncan's book, Yankee Nomad, came out, which included every picture he ever took and every telegram he ever sent or received, or roughly. And it made me realize that it was possible to have a life as a, you know, globe-trotting photojournalist. I mean, not immediately perhaps, but the world was out there waiting for you to decide to figure out where you wanted to go photograph and what kind of pictures you wanted to take, and that the world was there and at least a little bit receptive to it if you could pull it off. And so that book I still count as maybe the most influential. And somebody now, well, I mean, there's so many good photographers now. And what I tell when I do a teaching thing, I try and really beat up on kind of the laziness of the 25-year-olds who have all this incredible, on your phone or your iPad or your laptop, you can see every great photographer that ever was. Somebody has scanned their work, and you can find it. We had to always go to the library, go to 629.6 and see if there were some books there that you could take out. So the richness of what has been our world is out there, and it is the kind of thing that I think every photographer should take advantage of, because you just never get tired of looking at good pictures.
This is part of the acceptance speech for tomorrow, so I won't say everything, but on my mother's behalf. But Lee Miller, who was one of the other inductees, definitely a huge inspiration, a hero of my mom's. Steichen, Man Ray, 100%, absolutely. Man Ray is like, yeah, I mean, I was part of a actual video version that she directed of an homage to Man Ray, where I played Kiki, and my father was Brancusi, and her first assistant was Dolly, and her other assistant was James Joyce, and my brother was Man Ray, who looks strikingly like my brother Raven, and Elaine Irwin was Lee. And I mean, it's just beautiful. I don't remember how long homage, but she definitely, and Julia Margaret Cameron. So, I mean, I'd say those are some of the tops of my mother's inspirations and heroes, but there are definitely others as well.
Well, I would like to ask you in the audience, I mean, presumably you're here because you have an interest or a love or experience with the art of photography. What do you want to say? Who do you want to say it to? And how do you want to say it? I love the early primitive processes as much as I love the digital world. They do different things in different ways. So those are questions to me that are worth exploring. And I'll go back to Joseph Campbell's, who said, accidents in your life can often become main plots. And it's a worthwhile thing to think about, and I have it still tacked up in my darkroom. Accidents in your life can often become main plots. And back in 1992, I took students, I teach in a university, or I taught for years in a university. I took students on a field trip by a small pond outside of the small town I live in. And one of the more mature female students brought her 2 children. And we were all through, taking a break, sitting by the pond. And I looked over, and the 2 little boys she had brought, they're probably 5 and 4, something like that, had been catching fireflies, and they had a big mason jar. And they were excited. And I said, hey, fellas, I want to take a photograph. And they ignored me. And I said, hey, fellas, hold still. And they ignored me. And I took about a 5-second exposure. And I was disappointed because everything was out of focus. And the ending of this story is, it's become probably the most popular photograph I ever made. It sent my granddaughter to the university for 4 years, and that was and it was a total mistake. I was trying to make a sharp picture, and it just wasn't going to happen. And I guess part of the point also is we get channeled as artists and photographers. We want things to be this way, that way, and it's an ever-expanding medium, and so is your consciousness. And I'll get off this right now. And accidents in your life can often become main plots, and accidental photographs you make can sometimes be some of the most compelling things you've done. It's a funny old world.
We've run a bit over, so I think we'll end it on that beautiful note. I want to say thanks to the panel for being here. It's been just absolutely marvelous. Just a little glimpse into your processes and your thoughts, and just listening how heartfelt these years have been of work. I mean, you all lead with your heart, which is so beautiful to me, and such a medium that doesn't really gain the attention that it should. But I love that each one of you lead with your heart. It's just, I wish you know, your shooting days to continue forever, and thank you for providing us with such spectacular work, and thank you all for joining us.